Hey guys, this is Pat from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to make some jumpers, some copper jumpers for putting batteries in series for a solar system for power. And I'll show you how to make those. You don't have to go and buy those from a solar store or battery store. You can actually buy the wire, you can buy the crimping tool, and you can also buy the connectors. You can also buy the tubular lugs to go on the ends of your wire. I'll go ahead and show you how to make those. You can make those any length. So these particular ones, it's 6 inches from center to center because that's what it takes to make a straight line with a little bit of slack in there. You don't want this stuff totally, you don't want it really tight, so you want to have it nice and comfortable. So these have to be 6 inches for the particular batteries that I have here. I have, my friend gave me six volt lead acid batteries. They're golf cart batteries. He gave me. So I have to make some jumpers to accommodate these, and I have to buy 2 more batteries to make 48 volt string to add to the 4 that I currently have in operation right now. What you're going to need is you're going to need a pair of wire cutters. I have some heat shrink tubing. When you flatten it out, it's 1 1/4 from one side to the other, and this actually has a little bit of a sealer type of glue on the inside, so when you heat this up, it will actually adhere to the outside of the wire and also the tubular lug connectors that I'm using for the project. You're going to need some adequate wire to carry the load and current through from one battery to the next. This is actually a really heavy duty fine strand wire. The nice thing about the fine strand is that it's flexible. So the more strands that you have in your wire, the more flexible your cable is. Now some people can use, you can use a welding cable. You can buy this by the foot. And today all I'm going to be using are these 5/16 by 1/0 tubular connectors. And what I should have bought, instead of the 3/8, this is got a 3/8 inch hole. I should have got the 5/16, and just wasn't thinking when I hit the, when I went to order these up. But these will work fine. In order to determine the length of the straps that I need for this, or the inner links, or whatever you want to call these jumpers, I just set the batteries in the position that I'm going to have them set up permanently, and then I just take a distance between the 2 posts, center to center, and that's right at 6 inches. Then I get my 2 connectors out, and the first one I determine I can go from center to center on my connectors. So I set my connectors up at 6 inches center to center, and then I measure the distance between where the wire starts and where the wire ends, and I have between I'd say 4 3/8 of an inch is what I need my wire length to be. And what you can do to make this easy on yourself is, of course, to draw yourself a starting line or a reference line to where you can line the end of the wire up and measure out 4 3/8 inches and put another line. Now you don't have to hold the tape measure and hold the wire and try to cut the wire all at the same time. So all I have to do is mark that. And I do several at a time, so it's a little faster. And now I have little reference lines on the cable, and I can just go ahead and go through and cut with the cutters, the wire cutters, at that line. You need to strip the sheathing back off of the wire in order for it to penetrate into the tubular lug. And so I can determine the depth of that by just sticking a pencil or a straight edge or anything like that in there, and put my thumb on there, take a measurement, and I determine I need about 3/4 of an inch of wire exposed on each end of my jumper. I found the easiest way to do that is to take a razor and just lightly walk it around the wire. The best thing to do is to have, you know, a pair of strippers that will cut into the sheathing and strip the wire off, or, you know, strip the sheathing off without affecting the integrity of your wire, because you don't want to cut your wire, obviously. I'll see that goes on just perfectly. I've done enough of these to know just about where 3/4 of an inch is, so instead of measuring this, I think you can figure out that, I think you can just go ahead and, you know, if you're unsure of where 3/4 of an inch is, then by all means go ahead and measure that out. Okay, so now I got one of those done. I'll go ahead and cut the rest of them. And if you don't quite make it through, you just take and spread it like that. And you just lightly walk your razor along that, and it'll expose that. This is actually the best way to do it. That way I'm assured that I'm not cutting any of my wire, not affecting the integrity of my wire. Now another thing a guy can do is you can do the whole reference point thing again, where you have a reference line down here. You can go right up to the line with the wire, measure out 3/4 of an inch, and put another line, another reference line, and so you can do each one of them exactly the same. Now I can just roll that wire along through there like that. And they'll all be the same. So if you're in question of where 3/4 or any measurement is, you can always make a reference line, and that kind of helps speed up the process a little bit. Okay, there we go. We got our little pile of wire here, our jumper wire. So this is a little hydraulic crimping tool used for crimping these wires. Now they make the hammer version of these to where you have a little flat bar that has something similar to this in the bottom of it, and then you put a top piece on over top of your fitting, and you take a ball peen hammer and just strike the top of it. But yeah, I've been working with my my solar, and I just went ahead and cheated and got one of these. These are about 40 bucks. I got this on Amazon. Comes in really handy for not just doing the solar stuff, but other things, for like crimps around wire and different things for pulling cables and such. I have 5 wires, or jumper wires, for my batteries, and then I'll also have I have 10 1/0 by 3/8 inch, which they actually should be 5/16 to fit around the lugs of the batteries. What I mean by a lug on the batteries, I mean this guy right here. 5/16 fits around this lug a lot tighter than the 3/8 here that I'm working with, but 3/8 will work fine. Now what I like to do is I like to put antioxidant in each end of these fittings here, or each one of these crimps here, each one of these lugs. I just fill that about halfway full, and I do that to each one. This is just an antioxidant that keeps the wire from corroding on the inside. I'll go through and do the rest of these. Now I just insert the wire, and I just kind of give it just a light turn. That fills that whole socket up there. And then I keep this part parallel with the one on the opposite end, so it's nice and flat, so the wire's not twisted or doing anything weird. And I go ahead and do that with all of the rest of the wire. And connectors. You want to make sure all of your strands get tucked into the socket of these connectors here, or these lugs. So that antioxidant, that just embeds itself into that wire when I shove that in there like that. Now what we have to do is we have to crimp each of these wires onto the lug. On the back side of this crimping tool, there's a knob with an on and off on printed on there. And on means that I pump this and the jaws close, and when I hit off, when I turn this to off, it releases the hydraulic fluid inside the little reservoir here and allows these to spring back open again. So I just stick this in the vise here, and that way that gives me 2 free hands. And the reason for that is that I can be holding the lug and then pushing the wire in at the same time, putting in downward pressure or forward pressure, or how you want to look at that. Now I pump this down just enough to where it'll hold the lug on by itself. Now I still have 2 free hands. Now with this hand, my left hand, I can push in to the terminal or the lug, and then I can start pumping with my right hand and start to crimp that wire. And I crimp it all the way shut. Now this is going to hold until I turn the knob on the back side counterclockwise, and there you have a nice crimp on that wire and on that terminal. Of course, I do that to the other side. Tighten up the knob. Now that's holding by itself. I make sure that these are flat and parallel with one another. The connectors, or the ends here, I make sure that they are, let me turn this around where you can see a little better. I make sure that these are parallel to one another, or flat, the same. And then I push the wire in. Turn the knob counterclockwise to release, and there you have it. Now I'll go ahead and do the same thing with all the rest of them. So I'll make this flat or perpendicular to the jaws. So flat this way, pressure down 90 degrees the other way. So okay, now it's time to put heat shrink around this. Realistically, you really don't have to put heat shrink on here, but I think heat shrink just helps to keep the wires from bending on the connectors here, and it just makes it look a little better and keeps more of the any corrosion or moisture from getting in there. So again, I have a reference line at 1 5/8, and I can just go through and put like tick marks on the shrink tubing. Pencil works just fine, and I'm going to need 10 of these. Okay, now dealing with the heat shrinking on the connectors is as simple as getting, using a lighter or using a little propane torch. I find this to be easier because now I can do this hands-free. So I just get a little burner, a camp burner, light that. Just light the camp stove, and then I just apply the heat shrink tubing right over top of this. Now you have to be aware, now if your heat shrink tubing is more narrow than your connectors, sometimes your connectors are wider with different applications than the wire, and so you have to, if that's the case, if your connectors are actually wider than your wire, or the circumference of your heat shrink, then you have to put your heat shrink on first, on 2 pieces of heat shrink on, and then put your connector on. Now whether you're soldering or just crimping, you got to keep that in mind when you're using heat shrink tube. So then I just lightly warm this up, and that heat shrink tubing will start to conform to the wire connector. I just heat that all the way around. Make sure you can get this too hot where it'll start melting it. You don't want that. You just want a nice tight seal, and you can get these too hot where they start to burn and melt, and it'll make the heat shrink tubing brittle, and you don't want that to happen. Also, you don't want to melt your sheathing on your wire. Obviously you need to keep your batteries and everything like that away from flame, because there's a risk of fire there if you not careful. So you want to do this in a well ventilated area and all that good happy stuff. Okay, so you can see where the glue in here is melted actually, and is sealing against the sheathing on the wire. So there you have it. There's a jumper for my batteries, for a string of batteries. Okay, whenever you finish a project like this, whenever you're soldering or doing any kind of crimping like this, any wiring of sorts, you always want to make sure that you verify your work by checking continuity. This is a multimeter, and it's you want to go to ohms. There's a 9-volt battery in here. What it does is it sends a voltage from one end to the other and makes sure that there's continuity on one side or the other. So I'm checking to make sure that there's no resistance, or making sure that I have connection on each end here. Okay, they're all good. Well, I hope this helps somebody out there looking into making connections like this to a solar system. Any do-it-yourselfers out there, this can apply for any electrical type application. I know it's a lot cheaper for me, or a lot less expensive, I should say, to do this by myself as opposed to buying all these connections like this. And a lot of times when you go to buy a connection, it might be a little too long, a little too short. Generally you have to buy more, or you generally have to buy a longer one in order to make it work. And so if you get it just the right length, then it looks nice and crisp and clean. You got nice clean work that you're doing. I have a tendency to overbuild a little bit, so I build these a little more husky than what's required. So anyway, I appreciate y'all coming in here. Hopefully it helps y'all. Take care and God bless.